The first thing I saw was my own future lying in a trash can. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, literally. Torn into strips, soaked with coffee, and buried beneath crumpled paper towels less than 12 hours before the biggest scholarship deadline of my life. For a few seconds, I just stood there staring. My brain refused to process what my eyes already knew. The scholarship application I had spent 8 months building was gone. Every recommendation letter, every transcript copy, every essay draft, every document that was supposed to help me escape the life waiting for me back home. Gone. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed softly, indifferent to my panic. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. Maybe there was some mistake. Maybe this belonged to someone else. Maybe I was about to wake up. But then I saw my name. Noah Bennett. Printed clearly across a torn page, stained brown with coffee. My stomach dropped. Somebody had done this on purpose. The realization settled over me like ice water. People lost paperwork all the time. Printers jammed. Files disappeared. Accidents happened. But nobody accidentally ripped an application into dozens of pieces and dumped it in a trash can behind the scholarship office. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. It was 11:43 p.m. The administration building was almost empty. The deadline was tomorrow morning. I crouched beside the trash can and started collecting scraps. Maybe I could save something. Maybe I could piece it back together. It was ridiculous. Desperate. Pathetic, even. But desperation makes you do strange things. Especially when your father was already working double shifts. Especially when overdue bills were stacked on the kitchen table. Especially when everyone in your family was counting on you to succeed. A sharp sound echoed down the hallway. Footsteps. I froze. The corridor outside the scholarship office stretched long and empty beneath dim security lights. Whoever was walking wasn't hurrying. They moved slowly, deliberately. My pulse jumped. I straightened and looked toward the sound. Nothing. Just silence again. The footsteps had stopped. Hello? I called. No answer. The building remained still. The kind of stillness that somehow feels louder than noise. I exhaled and looked back at the ruined application. Then something else caught my attention. A photograph. It wasn't part of the application. It had been tucked underneath the shredded papers. My fingers hesitated before lifting it. The moment I saw the image, my chest tightened. It was my family. A picture taken 3 years earlier at my high school graduation. My dad was smiling. My mom had her arm around my shoulder. Someone had drawn a thick red X across all 3 of us. I stared at it, confused, then disturbed, then genuinely frightened. What kind of person did something like that? Why would anyone even have this photo? The picture had come from my social media account, but that didn't explain how it ended up here, or why it had been marked up like some kind of warning. A chill crawled up my spine. Suddenly, this felt bigger than a ruined scholarship application. Someone wasn't just trying to sabotage paperwork. Someone wanted me to know they had done it. My phone vibrated unexpectedly, nearly making me drop it. An unknown number flashed across the screen. One new message. My heartbeat accelerated as I opened it. There were only 5 words. Stop digging. You already lost. I stared at the screen. No name. No explanation. Just that. Before I could think, another message appeared. This one included a photograph. The image showed the exact hallway where I was standing. Taken only moments earlier. My blood ran cold. Whoever sent it had been here. Watching me. I spun around. The corridor looked empty. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness near the far stairwell, I caught movement. A figure. Tall. Motionless. Standing at the end of the hall. Watching. And just before the person stepped out of sight, the overhead light shifted enough for me to recognize him. Landon Hayes. The basketball king of Westbridge University. The most famous student on campus. And somehow, impossibly, the last person I ever expected to find standing beside the scene of my destroyed future. For a moment, I honestly thought I had imagined it. Landon Hayes was the kind of person people noticed from across a crowded arena. 6'3", captain of the basketball team, campus celebrity, the face plastered across recruitment posters and social media clips. He was not the kind of person who lingered in dark hallways outside scholarship offices at midnight. Yet I knew what I had seen. The second our eyes met, he disappeared through the stairwell door. I shoved the photograph into my backpack and ran after him. The metal door slammed somewhere below. By the time I reached the stairs, there was nobody there. Just the echo of footsteps fading into silence. I stood on the landing breathing hard, feeling ridiculous. Maybe he had every right to be there. Maybe he was studying late. Maybe he had forgotten something. But none of that explained why he had been watching, or why he had left the second I noticed him. My phone still felt heavy in my hand. Stop digging. You already lost. The message glowed on the screen like a threat. I took another look down the stairwell before finally giving up and heading home. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shredded application. The marked-up family photo. Landon standing in the shadows. By morning, rumors had already spread across campus. That was the thing about universities. News traveled faster than logic. By 10 o'clock, people were whispering outside classrooms. By lunch, students were openly staring at me. By 2 o'clock, somebody had posted online that I destroyed my own application because I wanted sympathy. According to the comments, I was desperate for attention. According to another version, I had missed the deadline and invented a story to save face. Nobody seemed interested in asking what actually happened. They had already chosen the version that entertained them most. I sat alone in the student center pretending to read while conversations floated around me. Did you hear about Bennett? Apparently he snapped. I heard the application was never finished. I heard he made the whole thing up. Every word landed like another stone. Then the room suddenly went quiet. Not completely, just enough for everyone to look toward the entrance. I did not need to turn around to know who had arrived. Landon Hayes had that effect on people. I stared down at my notebook as conversations shifted from me to him. The basketball team had practice that afternoon. Several players followed him through the building. Normally, he looked relaxed in public, confident, untouchable. Today was different. His expression was tight, focused, like he had not slept much either. I hated myself for noticing. I hated myself even more when I glanced up and caught him looking directly at me. The eye contact lasted less than a second. Then he looked away. No smile. No nod. Nothing. It should not have bothered me. Yet somehow it did. A few hours later, I found myself walking past the athletic center on my way to the library. The gym lights blazed against the evening sky. Through the glass walls, I could see practice underway. Players sprinted across the court. Coaches shouted instructions. Sneakers squeaked across polished hardwood. I kept walking until a familiar voice stopped me. Bennett. I turned. Landon stood outside one of the side entrances. Alone. The first thing I noticed was that he looked exhausted. The second was that he seemed nervous, which made absolutely no sense. Guys like Landon did not get nervous. What? I asked. He glanced around before speaking. You should stop asking questions about the application. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. That is your advice? Just trust me. I do not even know you. Something flickered across his face. Regret maybe. Exactly. Before I could respond, a voice called his name from inside the building. Landon stepped back toward the door. Then he hesitated. Not everyone involved is who you think they are. My frustration evaporated. What does that mean? He looked away. Nothing. Then why say it? Because you are looking in the wrong direction. He disappeared inside before I could stop him. I stood there staring after him, looking in the wrong direction. The words rattled around my head all evening. Later that night, while trying to reconstruct files from backup copies, I noticed something strange. An email notification buried in my scholarship account history. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then I checked the timestamp. 3 months earlier, someone had accessed my scholarship profile from an administrative account. Not once. Repeatedly. Nobody should have been in there except me and the scholarship committee. My pulse quickened. I clicked deeper into the records. The account belonged to someone inside the university. Someone with elevated permissions. Someone whose name had been partially redacted. I leaned closer to the screen. Most of the identifier was hidden, except for 3 letters that remained visible. Hey. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. Hey. 3 letters. That was all the system showed before the rest of the administrator identification disappeared behind security restrictions. 3 letters should not have meant anything. Universities employed thousands of people. Plenty of last names started with HAY. Yet my stomach sank anyway. Because only one person had spent the last 24 hours appearing everywhere my destroyed application seemed to lead. Landon Hayes. I immediately hated the conclusion my brain was trying to make. It felt too obvious. Too convenient. Too much like the kind of accusation people had already thrown at me without evidence. Still, I could not ignore it. Around midnight, I closed my laptop and rubbed my eyes. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of traffic outside. My father was still at work. My mother had fallen asleep on the couch after another shift at the grocery store. The sight tightened something inside my chest. She looked exhausted even in sleep. Her reading glasses rested crookedly on a stack of unpaid bills. I carefully lifted them and set them on the coffee table. Then my attention drifted toward one envelope sitting apart from the others. Hospital billing. My heart sank further. I knew money was tight. I did not realize it had become this bad. I opened the envelope before guilt could stop me. The amount due made my throat go dry. I stared at the number. Then I stared at it again. My father never talked about his health. He always brushed off doctor visits as routine. Suddenly, I was not sure how much of that had been true. The scholarship had never been about prestige. It had never been about impressing anyone. It was survival. Without it, everything became fragile. One unexpected expense. One missed paycheck. One emergency. That was all it would take. I barely slept. The next morning, I found myself walking across campus with a knot in my stomach and more questions than answers. The autumn air carried the smell of wet leaves and fresh coffee. Students laughed outside buildings. Bikes rolled past. Life continued as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, my future felt like it was balancing on a thread. I spent most of the morning trying to access more information about the administrative account. Every attempt hit another wall. Restricted access. Authorization denied. Request blocked. It was like someone had intentionally buried the trail. By afternoon, frustration had replaced exhaustion. I left the library and headed toward the records office. Halfway there, raised voices stopped me. The sound came from an empty hallway behind the administration wing. Instinct told me to keep walking. Curiosity ignored that advice immediately. I slowed near the corner. Someone was arguing. One voice belonged to an older man. The other belonged to Landon. "You promised this would stay buried," the older man snapped. "I promised I would handle it." Landon's voice sounded sharper than I had ever heard before. "This is handling it. You are making things worse." Silence followed. Then Landon spoke again, lower this time. "He deserves the truth." Every muscle in my body went still. The truth. My pulse quickened. I leaned slightly closer. A mistake. My shoe scraped against the floor. The conversation stopped instantly. "Great job, Noah. Truly professional spying skills." A second later, Landon stepped around the corner. His expression shifted the moment he saw me. Surprise first, then concern, then something harder to read. The older man behind him looked uncomfortable. He quickly disappeared into a nearby office. Landon and I stood alone in the hallway. "Were you listening?" he asked. "Were you hiding something?" I shot back. Neither of us answered immediately. The silence stretched. Finally, he sighed. "You should not be here." Funny. I was about to say the same thing. A faint smile almost appeared before disappearing again. It was the first crack I had ever seen in his perfect public image. For the first time, he looked less like the famous basketball captain and more like an exhausted 23-year-old carrying something heavy. "Noah." The way he said my name caught me off guard. Not because it sounded romantic, because it sounded familiar, like he had said it 100 times before. "What?" I asked. "You need to stop connecting this to me. Then explain the account access." His jaw tightened. That reaction told me more than words could. He knew exactly what I was talking about. Before he could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and immediately looked frustrated. "I have to go." "Convenient." "Noah." There was genuine urgency in his voice now. "Be careful who you trust." "Including you?" Something flickered in his eyes. Regret. Pain. Maybe both. Then he walked away without answering. I watched him disappear down the hallway. By evening, I was no closer to understanding anything. So I did the only thing left. I went back to the scholarship office. The building sat nearly empty again. The same cold lights. The same quiet hallways. The same feeling that something important had happened here and nobody wanted me to see it. I searched the area around the office, where my application had been destroyed. Most of it was pointless. Then I found something hidden beneath a filing cabinet near the wall. A folded piece of paper. Old. Yellowed at the edges. Definitely not part of the recent mess. I carefully unfolded it. My breath caught immediately. It was a scholarship donor document from years earlier. At the top sat a familiar name. The Hayes Family Educational Foundation. Beneath it was another name. One that hit me even harder. Robert Bennett. My father. I stared at the page in disbelief. My father had somehow been connected to the Hayes family years before I ever arrived at this university. But the document contained one final line that made my heart stop completely. Scholarship established in honor of the actions taken by Robert Bennett on May 17th. No explanation followed. No details. Just a date, a name, and a secret that apparently linked my family to Landon's long before either of us ever met. So why had nobody told me? The document stayed folded in my backpack for 2 days before I worked up the courage to show it to anyone. Not because I doubted what I had read, because I was afraid of what it meant. Every answer I uncovered seemed to create 3 new questions. Somehow my father was connected to the Hayes family. Somehow a scholarship tied to Landon's family foundation had my father's name buried inside its history. And somehow nobody had ever mentioned any of it. I sat alone in the library staring at the document again until the words blurred together. My phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number. My stomach immediately tightened. Another threat. Another warning. Instead, there was only a single sentence. Stop looking at old records in public. I nearly dropped the phone. My eyes darted around the library. Students sat scattered between shelves. Laptops glowed. Pages turned. Nobody appeared interested in me. Then I noticed a figure standing near the far exit. Landon. He gave the smallest nod toward the window before walking away. I stared after him. 5 minutes later, I found myself outside beneath gray afternoon skies wondering why I kept following someone I supposedly did not trust. Landon waited near a quiet courtyard behind the science building. Fallen leaves gathered along the stone paths. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. You sent that message? I asked. Yes. That is becoming a disturbing habit. To my surprise, he laughed softly. The sound caught me off guard. It made him seem less untouchable somehow. Less like a campus legend and more like a real person. You looked like you were about to announce your investigation to the entire library, he said. Maybe I wanted witnesses. Maybe you want attention. I rolled my eyes. That rumor is getting old. His expression shifted immediately. I know. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. Most people repeated the rumors. Landon was the first person who sounded genuinely angry about them. We started walking without really deciding to. The path circled behind several academic buildings where almost nobody went during the afternoon. The silence between us felt different now. Less hostile. Still cautious. But not hostile. Did you know about this? I finally asked, pulling the folded document from my backpack. His eyes landed on the paper. For the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely alarmed. Not guilty. Not defensive. Alarmed. Where did you get that? So you do know what it is. He rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. Noah, tell me the truth. The words came out sharper than intended. For once, just tell me the truth. He stopped walking. For several seconds, he stared toward the ground. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded tired. My father never wanted anyone talking about that scholarship. Why? Because it is connected to the worst day of our family's life. I waited. He looked like he wanted to say more. Instead, he shook his head. That is all I can tell you. Frustration flared inside me. Then something unexpected happened. Landon's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and immediately declined the call. A few seconds later, it rang again. He declined it again. Then a third time. The expression on his face changed each time. Not annoyance. Worry. Real worry. Everything okay? The question escaped before I could stop it. He looked surprised that I asked. Not really. Another call appeared. This time he answered. I am coming, he said quietly. Just give me 20 minutes. When the call ended, neither of us moved. Hospital? I asked. His eyes widened slightly. Apparently, I had guessed correctly. He exhaled. My mother. The words were simple. The emotion behind them was not. Suddenly pieces started rearranging themselves. The exhaustion. The missed sleep. The constant tension. The secret meetings. For the first time I saw the person behind the reputation. Everybody on campus treated Landon like he had the perfect life. Maybe nobody realized he was carrying things too. Is she okay? I asked. He stared at me for a moment before answering. Most days. Something about that response hurt more than details would have. We continued walking toward the parking lot. Neither of us said much after that. Yet the silence felt easier now. Like two people sitting in the same storm instead of standing on opposite sides of it. As we reached his truck, a group of students crossed the lot nearby. One of them noticed me and immediately laughed. Hey Noah, he called. Destroy any more applications lately? The others laughed with him. Heat rushed into my face. Before I could respond, Landon stepped forward. It was subtle, just one step, but it placed him directly between me and them. His expression never changed. He simply looked at the group until their laughter died. Nobody argued. Nobody pushed further. They walked away awkwardly instead. The entire interaction lasted maybe 10 seconds. Yet it stayed with me long after. Because Landon never said a word. He did not make a speech. He did not start a fight. He simply made it clear that I was not standing there alone. After they left, he looked annoyed. Not at me. At them. You did not have to do that, I said. Yes, I did. The answer came so quickly it sounded automatic. Like he had not even thought about it. Before I could ask what he meant, something slipped from the folder tucked beneath his arm. A photograph landed near my feet. I bent down and picked it up, then froze. It was old. At least 15 years old. A hospital room. A younger version of my father stood beside a hospital bed. Next to him was a man I immediately recognized from university websites and foundation portraits. Landon's father. Written across the back in faded ink were 6 words that made my pulse stop. The man who saved our family. Why would Landon's father write that about mine? I did not sleep that night. The photograph sat on my desk while questions circled endlessly through my head. The man who saved our family. The words felt impossible. My father had never mentioned Landon's family. Not once. Not when I applied to Westbridge University. Not when I received acceptance letters. Not when I started competing for the scholarship that carried the Hayes name. Every answer seemed buried beneath another layer of silence. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I was done collecting clues. I wanted the truth. Unfortunately, the truth apparently had other plans. When I arrived at campus the next morning, an envelope was waiting in my student mailbox. No return address. No stamp. Just my name written across the front. My pulse quickened immediately. I opened it right there in the hallway. Inside was a copy of a bank statement. At first I thought it had been delivered by mistake. Then I saw my last name. Bennett. My hands froze. The statement showed a series of anonymous payments stretching back nearly 4 years. Tuition assistance. Housing assistance. Emergency educational grants. Thousands of dollars. My vision blurred. The amounts covered gaps that should have been impossible for my family to manage. I knew exactly how much my parents earned. I knew how many overtime shifts my father worked. I knew how often my mother pretended she was not tired. Yet somehow these payments had quietly appeared whenever we needed them most. The sender's name had been hidden, but one detail remained visible. Hayes Family Foundation. For several seconds I could not breathe. The hallway noise faded around me. For years. Someone had been helping my family for 4 years. Long before the scholarship. Long before the rumors. Long before I ever spoke to Landon. My first emotion was not gratitude. It was anger. Raw, confusing anger. Because suddenly every interaction with Landon looked different. Every warning. Every appearance. Every attempt to protect me. Every secret. I spent the next hour trying to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Then I found another one. Hidden inside the envelope was a folded letter. The paper was old enough that the corners had yellowed. My father's handwriting covered the page. I recognized it instantly. The letter had never been mailed. It looked more like a draft someone kept and never sent. Dear Richard Hayes, it began. Thank you will never be enough for what your family has done for mine. If Noah ever learns the truth, I hope he understands that I accepted your help because I had no other choice. My stomach dropped. I stopped reading, then forced myself to continue. The next line hit even harder. Landon wanted me to tell him years ago. I was the one who refused. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Landon wanted me to know. Years ago. My eyes scanned the rest of the page. My father described medical bills, missed work, financial struggles he had hidden from me throughout high school. The Hayes family had stepped in quietly after an event neither man ever explained. The support came with one condition. Noah could never know. I read the letter 3 times before reality finally settled in. Landon had known who I was before I ever arrived at Westbridge. He knew my family. He knew our struggles. He knew about the scholarship. And through all of it, he had acted like we were strangers. Something inside me cracked. Not because he helped. Because he lied. Every conversation suddenly felt rehearsed. Every moment felt manipulated. Was that why he watched me? Was that why he kept showing up? Was that why he always seemed one step ahead? By afternoon, I was furious. I marched across campus with the envelope stuffed inside my backpack and exactly one destination in mind. The basketball arena. Practice had already started. The sound of bouncing basketballs echoed through the building. Coaches shouted instructions. Players sprinted across the court. Landon noticed me immediately. I could tell from the way his expression changed. He jogged toward the sideline. "Noah, do not." My voice came out sharper than intended. Several players glanced our way. Landon looked around before motioning toward an empty hallway. I followed because I wanted answers, not an audience. The second the door closed behind us, I pulled out the documents and shoved them into his hands. His face lost all color. That was answer enough. "How long?" I asked. Silence. "How long have you known?" His jaw tightened. "A long time." I laughed once. The sound was bitter. That is what I thought. "Noah, listen to me." "No." "You listen." Months of frustration poured out at once. You watched me destroy myself trying to figure this out. You watched me get blamed. You watched people turn me into a joke. And all along you already knew. It is not that simple. Then explain it. The words echoed through the hallway. For a moment, he looked genuinely miserable. Not defensive. Not angry. Miserable. "I was trying to protect you." I almost laughed again. That is what everyone says when they decide somebody else does not deserve the truth. The hurt in his eyes appeared so quickly I nearly missed it. Then he looked away. "You are right." The admission caught me completely off guard. "I should have told you." For 1 second I almost softened. Then he said the one thing that destroyed any chance of that. "But if I had told you, you never would have gotten into Westbridge." My heart stopped. The hallway suddenly felt very small. Very quiet. I stared at him. "What does that mean?" Landon closed his eyes briefly, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. Then he opened them again. "It means your acceptance was never random. And neither was mine." The words hung between us long after Landon stopped speaking. "It means your acceptance was never random. And neither was mine." I stared at him, waiting for the explanation that would somehow make everything make sense. It never came. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Finally, I stepped back. "I cannot do this right now. Noah, do not." My voice cracked harder than I wanted. "Just do not." For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I turned around and walked away before he could stop me. The sound of practice resumed behind the closed door. Basketballs bounced. Coaches shouted. Life kept moving. Mine felt stuck. The next few days blurred together. I stopped answering messages. I stopped looking for clues. I stopped trying to solve the mystery that had consumed every waking thought. Because every answer seemed to lead back to the same thing. Landon knew more than he admitted. Maybe he always had. Every memory replayed differently now. The warning messages. The late-night encounters. The way he always seemed to appear exactly when something happened. The way he protected me without explanation. None of it felt accidental anymore. I sat alone in the library one evening pretending to study while rain tapped softly against the windows. The scholarship deadline had passed. The investigation was stalled. Rumors still followed me through campus. Yet somehow none of that hurt as much as the realization that I had started trusting someone who kept hiding pieces of the truth. My phone buzzed. One new message. Landon, please let me explain. I stared at it for nearly a minute before locking my screen without replying. 20 minutes later, another message arrived. Are you okay? I ignored that one too. The worst part was that I knew he meant it. That was what made everything harder. If Landon had been cruel, manipulation would have been easy to recognize. Instead, he had been kind, patient, protective, which left me wondering which parts were real. 3 days later, I received a call from my mother. The second I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. My father had collapsed during a shift. Not seriously. At least that was what she kept repeating. But they were taking him to the hospital for tests. I left campus immediately. The drive felt twice as long as normal. Every red light became an enemy. Every minute stretched forever. By the time I reached the hospital, my mother was sitting in a plastic chair clutching a paper coffee cup she clearly had not touched. She smiled when she saw me. The kind of smile parents use when they are trying not to scare their children. I hated it instantly. My father looked exhausted when I finally saw him. Older somehow. Smaller. The realization hit harder than I expected. Parents spend years convincing their children they can handle anything. Then one day you notice they are human. You should be in class, he joked weakly. You should stop giving everyone heart attacks, I replied. He laughed, then coughed, then laughed again. The conversation drifted towards safer topics. School, work, the weather, everything except the things that mattered. Everything except the bills, the scholarship, The secrets. Hours later, I stepped outside for air. The evening sky had already darkened. Hospital lights reflected across wet pavement. I sat on a bench and rubbed my eyes. Exhaustion settled into my bones. "You look terrible." I froze. That voice. Of course. I turned and found Landon standing several feet away holding 2 cups of coffee. For a moment, neither of us moved. "How did you know I was here?" I asked. His expression tightened. "Your mother called mine." "Of course she did." Another connection nobody bothered mentioning. He set 1 coffee beside me and sat at the opposite end of the bench. Not close. Not far. Just enough distance to respect the wall I had built between us. We sat in silence for several minutes. Rain dripped from the hospital awning. Ambulance lights flashed somewhere in the distance. Finally, Landon spoke. "How is he?" I knew exactly who he meant. "Tired." Landon nodded, like he understood that answer better than most people would. "My mother has been in and out of hospitals for years," he said quietly. "Eventually, you start measuring good days differently." I looked over before I could stop myself. His gaze remained fixed on the parking lot. There was no performance in his voice. No attempt to gain sympathy. Just honesty. Maybe for the first time. "I am sorry," I said. The words surprised both of us. He smiled faintly. "Me too." Another silence followed. Strange. Comfortable. Sad. Then my phone buzzed. An email notification. I opened it automatically. My stomach dropped. The university disciplinary committee had scheduled an emergency hearing. New evidence had been submitted regarding the destruction of my scholarship application. My pulse quickened as I read the final line. "Pending review, your eligibility may be permanently revoked." I looked up from the screen. Across the parking lot, a black SUV sat beneath a street lamp. Someone inside was watching us. And the moment I noticed the vehicle, it pulled away into the night. Everything fell apart 3 days later. The disciplinary hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. 20 minutes to dismantle years of work. 20 minutes to erase a future I had spent my entire life chasing. I sat across from a panel of university officials while printed documents passed between them. Nobody looked angry. That somehow made it worse. They looked tired. Detached. Like people completing paperwork before lunch. One administrator cleared his throat and slid a folder toward me. "New evidence has been submitted." I already knew what came next. The moment I saw the screenshots, my stomach dropped. Someone had accessed my scholarship account using credentials linked to my student profile. There were timestamps, activity logs, download records. Everything pointed directly at me. "This is not possible," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to somebody else. "I did not do this." Nobody argued. Nobody accused me outright. They simply exchanged glances. The kind adults use when they think someone is lying but do not want to embarrass them. "The committee has reached a preliminary decision," another administrator said. "Pending appeal, your scholarship eligibility has been revoked." Revoked. Such a small word. 8 letters. 1 second to say. Enough to destroy everything. I walked out of the building feeling strangely calm. The kind of calm that arrives when shock is too large for your brain to process. Students crossed campus carrying backpacks and coffee cups. Professors hurried between classes. Somewhere a marching band practiced. The world looked exactly the same. Mine did not. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Calls. Messages. Notifications. I ignored all of them. By evening, the rumors had evolved again. According to social media, the university had uncovered proof that I sabotaged my own application. According to strangers online, I was a fraud. According to people who had never spoken to me, I deserved what happened. I stopped reading after that. There was no point. Truth had become irrelevant. Narratives were easier. I drove home that night because I did not know where else to go. My father was sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived. The hospital bracelet still circled his wrist. My mother stood at the stove pretending to cook while secretly watching both of us. Parents always know when something is wrong, even before words are spoken. "You got the decision," my father said quietly. I nodded. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he exhaled and looked down at the table. Somehow that hurt more than anger would have. My father had spent years believing education would give me opportunities he never had. Now I could actually see the disappointment he was trying to hide. Not disappointment in me. Disappointment in life. In circumstances. In bad luck. Somehow that felt worse. "I am sorry," I said. His head lifted immediately. "For what?" "For all of it." He stared at me like I had said something ridiculous. "Noah." His voice cracked slightly. You have nothing to apologize for. Maybe that should have helped. Instead, it nearly broke me. Because I knew exactly how much he had sacrificed. The overtime shifts. The missed weekends. The exhaustion. The medical issues he hid. And despite all of it, I still failed. Later that night, I sat alone on the back porch watching darkness settle over the neighborhood. My future had always existed as a straight line. Graduate. Earn the scholarship. Get a career. Help my family. Suddenly, the line was gone. I had no idea what came next. My phone buzzed again. Landon. I almost ignored it. Almost. The message contained only 4 words. Please answer your phone. I stared at the screen, then deleted the notification. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. This one longer. The evidence is fake. I can prove it. I laughed bitterly. Too late. Everything felt too late. Another message arrived. Noah, please. I switched my phone off completely. The silence that followed felt both terrible and necessary. The next morning, I packed a bag. Not much. Just enough clothes for a few days. My plan was simple. Leave campus. Withdraw quietly. Figure out work. Help my family. Stop pretending the scholarship battle could still be won. Around noon, I returned to Westbridge to collect the last of my belongings from my dorm. Rain covered the campus in gray. Students hurried beneath umbrellas. Nobody noticed me, which was good. I preferred it that way. The room looked strangely empty once everything was packed. For years of memories reduced to a few cardboard boxes. I carried the final box downstairs and loaded it into my car. Then I stopped. Across the parking lot stood Landon. Rain soaked his jacket. His hair was drenched. He looked like he had been searching for me. For one terrible second, I wanted to walk over there. I wanted answers. I wanted the truth. I wanted things to make sense. Instead, I got into my car. Landon took a step forward. Then another. I drove away before he could reach me. The image stayed in my rearview mirror until the rain swallowed it completely. By evening, I had made peace with one thing. It was over. The scholarship was gone. My future at Westbridge was gone. Whatever existed between Landon and me was gone too. The next morning, I woke up to 23 missed calls. Not from Landon. Not from my parents. Not from the university. Every single call came from the same unknown number. Beneath them sat one voicemail. My pulse quickened as I pressed play. A distorted voice filled the speaker. If you want to know who destroyed your application, turn on the news. The message ended. Confused, I grabbed the remote and switched on the television. Every channel carried the same breaking story. Westbridge University's biggest donor had just been accused of academic fraud. And standing behind the reporters, being escorted into the center of the scandal, was Landon Hayes. For a full minute, I stood frozen in front of the television. Reporters crowded the screen. Headlines flashed across the bottom. Words like corruption, investigation, donor misconduct, and university scandal rolled endlessly past. Yet I barely heard any of them. I only saw Landon. He stood in the middle of the chaos wearing the same exhausted expression I had seen so many times before. Only now I finally understood it. This was what he had been carrying. This was what he had been trying to warn me about. My phone exploded with notifications. Messages. News alerts. Social media updates. One notification stood out above the rest. Emergency University Assembly scheduled for 12 noon. Mandatory attendance for scholarship candidates and student leadership. My pulse quickened. Something was happening. Something big. 2 hours later, I found myself back on campus for the first time since packing my belongings. The auditorium was packed. Students filled every row. Faculty members lined the walls. Reporters occupied the back section. The atmosphere felt electric. Nervous. Unstable. Everyone knew a scandal had broken. Nobody knew how far it reached. I slipped into a seat near the rear. Conversations buzzed around me. Then the room suddenly fell silent. The university. President stepped onto the stage. Behind him stood several board members. And beside them stood Landon. A murmur rippled through the crowd immediately. The president adjusted the microphone. Today we will address several matters concerning donor influence, scholarship interference, and recent disciplinary actions. My stomach tightened. Scholarship interference. Every nerve in my body seemed to wake up at once. The president continued speaking. Then he announced something nobody expected. Mr. Hayes has requested the opportunity to make a statement. Shock spread through the room. Landon stepped forward. The auditorium became completely silent. I had seen him play before thousands of people. I had seen him dominate a basketball court without hesitation. Somehow this looked harder. His hands remained steady, but I could see the tension in his eyes. He glanced toward the crowd. Then, unexpectedly, toward me. Just for a second. Then he faced the microphone. For months, he began, someone has used my family's foundation and my family's influence to manipulate university decisions. The room erupted into whispers. Landon did not stop. I know because I discovered it myself. He pulled several documents from a folder. Screens behind the stage illuminated with emails, financial records, access logs, and internal communications. My heart pounded. The evidence appeared one piece at a time. Administrative accounts, unauthorized scholarship access, fabricated activity records. Every document pointed toward the same group of individuals. Senior university officials connected directly to the donor currently under investigation. Gasps spread through the audience. Then came the part that changed everything. Landon displayed security footage. The scholarship office hallway. The night my application had been destroyed. The image was grainy but unmistakable. A student entered the office carrying a key card. Moments later, he emerged carrying my application folder. The timestamp matched exactly. The student was not me. The room exploded with noise. I sat completely frozen. For the first time since this nightmare began, the truth existed where everyone could see it. Not rumors. Not accusations. Proof. Landon's voice remained calm. Noah Bennett never accessed his account. Those records were altered. Another screen appeared. Digital forensic reports. Expert verification. Authentication data. Every false piece of evidence used against me was systematically dismantled. One by one. Methodically. Publicly. The same crowd that had watched my reputation collapse now watched it being rebuilt. Then Landon said something that made the entire room go silent again. I knew this was happening before Noah did. My chest tightened. He continued before anyone could react. I found evidence months ago. I tried to investigate quietly. I thought I could protect him without exposing everything. Regret filled his voice. Real regret. I was wrong. The honesty hit harder than any dramatic speech could have. Because while I was protecting secrets, he was paying the price for them. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Landon looked directly into the audience. The disciplinary action against Noah Bennett should never have happened. The university president nodded grimly. Effective immediately, all sanctions against Mr. Bennett are revoked. Applause erupted across the auditorium. Then more applause. Louder this time. Students stood. Faculty members joined them. The sound echoed through the room. I sat motionless because I did not know how to process any of it. Months of humiliation, fear, anger, gone in a matter of minutes. Then Landon delivered one final truth. There is one more thing. The room quieted again. His voice softened. The anonymous educational support received by the Bennett family was approved by me. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Not because I felt obligated. Not because of charity. He swallowed hard. Because Noah mattered to me long before he ever knew my name. My heart stopped. The silence that followed felt endless. Every person in the auditorium seemed to disappear. There was only Landon standing beneath the stage lights and the impossible sincerity in his eyes. For the first time since all of this began, he was not hiding behind secrets. He was choosing a side publicly, clearly, completely, and he was choosing me. Then a university attorney hurried onto the stage carrying a folder. He whispered something urgently into the president's ear. The president's expression changed instantly. Confusion, then surprise, then shock. The microphone picked up only 7 words before he turned away. They just found the original application. The auditorium remained silent for several seconds after the announcement. Then everything happened at once. Faculty members hurried across the stage. Reporters lifted cameras. Students whispered to one another. Yet I barely heard any of it. My attention remained fixed on Landon. For months, I had chased answers through rumors, hidden records, anonymous messages, and half-finished conversations. Now the truth stood directly in front of me. Not perfect, not simple, but real. The original application was recovered later that afternoon from a locked storage room connected to the university offices under investigation. Every page was intact. Every recommendation letter. Every transcript. Every essay. The scholarship committee verified the documents personally. The evidence that had been used against me was formally declared fraudulent. The disciplinary action disappeared from my record. Public statements followed. Apologies followed. Meetings followed. It all felt strangely unreal. For so long I had imagined the moment my name would finally be cleared. I expected triumph, relief, celebration. Instead, I mostly felt tired. The kind of exhaustion that arrives after carrying fear for too long. 2 days later, I sat beside my father in the backyard while autumn sunlight filtered through the trees. His health scare had forced conversations we should have had years earlier. No more pretending. No more protecting each other through silence. He finally told me everything. Years ago, before I was old enough to remember, a highway accident changed both of our families forever. My father had pulled Richard Hayes from a wrecked vehicle and stayed with him until help arrived. The injuries Richard suffered changed his life permanently. The gratitude never disappeared. Over the years, the Hayes family quietly stayed connected. When medical bills began overwhelming my parents, Richard helped. When college seemed impossible, he helped again. But there had always been one condition. They never wanted me to feel indebted. They wanted every achievement to belong to me, not to them. I thought I was protecting your pride, my father admitted quietly. I looked down at my hands. Maybe everybody was trying to protect something. He smiled sadly. And look how much trouble that caused. We both laughed. The first real laugh in a very long time. The scholarship committee reached its final decision the following week. I received not only full reinstatement, but an expanded academic grant funded through a newly restructured foundation program. This time, everything happened openly, transparently. No secrets, no hidden conditions. When the official letter arrived, my mother cried before I even finished reading it aloud. My father pretended something had gotten into his eye. Nobody believed him. As for the people responsible, the investigation continued without me. For the first time, I no longer felt responsible for carrying every battle alone. Some truths belonged in the light. The university could handle the rest. The hardest conversation happened 3 days later. Landon and I met on the basketball court long after everyone else had gone home. The arena lights were dim. Empty seats stretched around us. The same place that had once felt intimidating now felt strangely peaceful. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. We simply sat side by side on the front row of the bleachers. You should have told me, I finally said. Landon nodded immediately. I know. There was no excuse in his voice. No attempt to defend himself. Just honesty. I kept thinking I could fix everything first, he said quietly. Then I would explain. I stared out across the empty court. You were not the only one making decisions for other people. He looked at me. What does that mean? I smiled faintly. I decided you were manipulating me before I ever let you explain. The silence that followed felt lighter somehow. Not because the hurt disappeared, because neither of us was hiding from it anymore. For what it is worth, Landon said after a moment, the first time I saw you at Westbridge, I was terrified. I laughed. You? Terrified? Absolutely. You are 6'3". Fear does not care about height. The answer made me laugh harder than it should have. Landon smiled too. For the first time since all of this began, the weight between us finally eased. Then his expression softened. I never helped because I felt obligated, Noah. My heart skipped. I know. I should have said it sooner. Probably. I am saying it now. The look in his eyes carried months of unsaid words. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. Just sincere. Steady. Certain. The kind of feeling built slowly through trust, mistakes, forgiveness, and choosing someone again after every reason not to. I reached over and took his hand. Simple. Quiet. Honest. He squeezed back immediately. No secrets left. No misunderstandings left. Just two people who had finally stopped running from the truth. Months later, graduation arrived beneath bright spring skies. My parents sat in the front section of the audience. Landon's mother attended too, healthy enough to be there in person. Watching all of them together felt surreal. The distance between our families had vanished long ago. We simply had not known it yet. When my name was called, applause echoed through the stadium. I crossed the stage carrying more than a diploma. I carried a future that once seemed impossible. A future earned through every setback, every sacrifice, every difficult truth. After the ceremony ended, Landon found me near the edge of the field. The crowd moved around us while sunlight stretched across the grass. Ready? He asked. I looked toward the future waiting beyond campus. Then back at him. The answer came easily. Yeah, I said, smiling as I slipped my hand into his. I think we finally are.